Have you ever felt that the deeper your mind delves, the lonelier you become? That the more you perceive the invisible workings of the world, the less people are willing to listen? It's not paranoia. It has a name. It's the burden of lucidity. Society fears deep thinkers, not because they are wrong, but because they see what others avoid seeing. Since ancient times, individuals who dared to question the certainties of the majority have been silenced, ignored, or even persecuted. Socrates was sentenced to death. Nietzsche was ridiculed during his lifetime. Galileo was imprisoned. Tesla died forgotten. None of them were fools. The problem was not a lack of intelligence, but the discomfort it caused. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most relentlessly honest philosophers, went so far as to say that intelligence is not a gift, but a curse that isolates. But why is this? What is it about a clear mind that causes rejection? The answer is deeply rooted in human nature. When you meet someone who is physically strong, you may even feel admiration. When you encounter someone rich, you may feel envy, but you don't feel attacked. However, when faced with someone who is intellectually deeper, something inside people recoils. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. A deep thinker does not impose ideas. They reflect. And what they reflect is the limitations of others. This explains why so many thinkers are pushed away, even in silence. You don't have to speak to make people uncomfortable. Just existing is enough. Intelligence causes a visceral discomfort because it is directly linked to identity. We define ourselves by our thoughts. When someone questions them, we don't just feel that an idea is being attacked, but that our very essence is being challenged. That is why intelligence, more than physical strength or beauty, provokes resistance. It threatens people's sense of inner stability. While muscles and money are seen as external attributes, the mind touches the core of the ego. For many, being challenged intellectually means feeling exposed, vulnerable, inadequate. The mere presence of someone more conscious can trigger emotional feelings of inadequacy, even without intention. Thinkers don't need to show off. They just need to exist with depth to disturb the superficial balance that many build. And here's the paradox. Deep thinkers, as much as they crave authentic connection, often experience the exact opposite. They try to share a broader view, a legitimate question, and are met with blank stares, discomfort, or silence. Not because they lack empathy or teaching skills, but because touching on reality requires courage, and most prefer the comfort of illusions. We live in a culture that rewards the appearance of wisdom, but rejects the discomfort of truth. Thinking deeply has never been easy, but that is precisely what makes it necessary. Meanwhile, those who question widely accepted beliefs continue to walk a lonely path. This is the true paradox of intelligence. The more someone seeks the truth, the more they tend to stray from the majority. But this rejection goes beyond social discomfort. It has a scientific basis. Neuroscience studies show that when someone feels intellectually inferior, their amygdala, the region of the brain linked to fear response, is activated. In simple terms, the presence of someone smarter can trigger a threat response, as if it were a physical danger. The question is, why does the brain respond to intelligence as if it were a real threat? The answer lies in our evolution. For most of human history, the instinct to belong to a group was vital. Being accepted by a tribe guaranteed protection and resources. Being excluded meant vulnerability. As a result, our brains were shaped to prioritize social harmony, not the solitary pursuit of knowledge. When a deep thinker enters a group and challenges established ideas, it destabilizes collective cohesion. Unconsciously, they are seen as someone who disrupts the balance, and the group reacts with resistance, sarcasm, or distancing, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. This pattern intensifies in collective environments. A Stanford University study published in 2021 revealed that a person's intelligence is perceived as less threatening in one-on-one conversations. But in groups, that same intelligence triggers defense mechanisms. This is because, in public, status matters more. The presence of someone who expresses complex ideas can threaten the social value of others. Instinctively, people try to protect themselves by excluding, minimizing, or ridiculing. Several cognitive biases explain this. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows that people with low knowledge tend to overestimate their competence, while the more intelligent often question themselves. This creates an imbalance. Those who know less speak with more conviction, and those who know more speak with more caution. In addition, confirmation bias leads people to seek only what reinforces their beliefs. When confronted with something new, they do not reconsider. They resist. This gives rise to the so-called backfire effect. The stronger the evidence, the more they cling to what they already believed. In this scenario, deep thinkers are not rejected because they are wrong, but because they challenge people's mental comfort zone. As a result of this deep-rooted mechanism, society almost automatically favors predictable comfort over uncomfortable clarity. This imposes an invisible barrier on deep thinkers, not only social, but psychological, biological, and cultural. The problem is not that intelligence is not valued. It is that it is feared when it threatens the established order. Most people prefer comforting certainties to disconcerting truths. And this is precisely where the ideas of great thinkers encounter resistance. Arthur Schopenhauer, with his sharp insight into the human condition, was one of the few to state bluntly that intelligence is more of a curse than a blessing. For him, the more deeply one understands human nature, the more difficult it becomes to maintain ties with a society that operates on instinct, interest, and illusion. Schopenhauer believed that most people live dominated by a blind and irrational force, the will to live. This will manifest itself as a desire for pleasure, security, status, and continuity. However, deep thinkers, instead of being driven by this irrational urge, develop something he called the will to truth, an uncontrollable impulse to understand the world as it really is, even if it hurts. And it does hurt, because this quest distances them from the masses, who live for distractions, easy rewards, and superficial relationships. While many find meaning in routine, entertainment, and social relationships, the deep thinker sees these elements as mere veils that hide the big, unanswered questions. And this is not intellectual elitism, it is perception. The deep thinker perceives the fragility of social conventions, the polished falseness of everyday interactions, the superficiality of the desires that drive the world. They can no longer participate in social games without feeling a certain strangeness. So, little by little, they withdraw. Not out of arrogance, but out of emotional incompatibility. What is a source of pleasure for many becomes a source of unease for them. They see what others ignore, that many relationships are disguised transactions, that much discourse is a repetition of inherited opinions, that most conversations are walls, not bridges. This lucidity comes at a price. The deep thinker begins to feel alienated in environments where everything revolves around appearances and convenience. The world seems too small for the size of his questions, and this creates a chasm. While the rest chase immediate goals, he seeks meaning. While the world celebrates social victories, he contemplates finitude and absurdity. This dissociation makes him, in the eyes of others, cold, skeptical, distant. But in reality, he is just someone who has decided not to pretend, who has chosen to face reality without filters. And those who do so, sooner or later, end up paying the price of loneliness. Schopenhauer did not limit himself to diagnosing the loneliness of the intelligent. He also proposed ways to overcome it. For him, loneliness was not a sentence, but a refuge. A place where the thinker could exist without having to conform to social expectations. He argued that instead of seeking acceptance at any cost, deep thinkers should embrace seclusion as a tool for creation, reflection, and inner freedom. Intelligence, by separating us from others, also returns us to ourselves. It is in this intimate space that the possibility of a more authentic life arises. In silence, far from social noise, ideas flourish with greater clarity. But this does not mean living isolated from the world. Schopenhauer also suggested that people with greater intellectual sensitivity should seek out like-minded peers, not to form a majority, but to create sincere bonds, even if rare. Often, this encounter happens in books, philosophical works, or in discreet exchanges with those who also question the obvious. Instead of striving for general approval, thinkers should recognize that their energy must be directed wisely. Not every idea needs to be shared. Not every mind is ready to receive it. Deep communication requires context, and silence is sometimes more strategic than confrontation. These recommendations remain relevant today. In a world dominated by constant stimulation, the ability to think deeply has become almost subversive. Social media has accelerated a phenomenon where the simplest, fastest, and most emotional override the complex, slow, and rational. The algorithm does not reward those who provoke reflection. It rewards those who provoke clicks. Viralization requires reduction. And deep thinkers face a chronic difficulty. Their ideas, by their very nature, do not fit into slogans. They need time, nuance, pause, and presence. But time is what we have the least. Nuance is what is consumed the least. And presence is what is valued the least. That is why so much empty content dominates the digital space. Shallow jokes, catchphrases, manufactured outrage. All of these engage more than a well-argued idea. The attention market favors immediacy. And in this scenario, depth seems slow, uninteresting, unnecessary. But that is precisely why it becomes even more urgent. The deep thinker cannot compete in the same game. They need to create another one. A game where quality is worth more than quantity, where truth is not traded for acceptance. And that starts with a choice: to stop trying to be understood by everyone and start connecting with the few who really listen. Algorithms don't just prioritize engagement. They shape the collective perception of what deserves attention. And what engages the most is not truth, but emotion. Indignation, superficial humor, controversy. All of this generates likes, comments, and mass sharing. Meanwhile, complex ideas that require reflection and discomfort are swallowed up by digital silence. Echo chambers form. People start consuming only what confirms what they already believe, becoming increasingly closed to new perspectives. In this environment, deep thinking not only loses space, it becomes a foreign body, an element that disturbs, that disrupts the fluidity of consumption, and is therefore rejected or ridiculed. But this rejection does not begin on social media. It is cultivated from an early age. The institutions that shape our minds, such as schools and workplaces, reproduce the same pattern. Schools say they value critical thinking, but what they reward is obedience. Students who repeat information are praised. Those who question are labeled as rebels. Instead of encouraging independent thinking, the educational system trains cogs for a mechanism that demands repetition and conformity. In the corporate world, the logic is even more straightforward. What matters is not intelligence, but adaptation. Those who maintain order are promoted. Those who challenge, even with good ideas, are excluded. This helps explain why so many geniuses were only recognized after death. During their lifetimes, their ideas were seen as a threat. Galileo was imprisoned. Van Gogh died poor. Tesla was forgotten. Alan Turing, the father of modern computing, saved millions of lives by deciphering Nazi codes. But instead of being honored, he was punished for his sexuality and driven to suicide. Hypatia of Alexandria, a brilliant philosopher and mathematician, was murdered for challenging religious fanaticism. They all had something in common. They saw beyond their time, and that made them dangerous. The same happened to Nietzsche. His ideas about morality, the will to power, and his criticism of traditional values were considered threatening. He was accused of madness, ridiculed, ignored. Today, his philosophy influences fields as diverse as literature, psychology, and politics. His words shaped centuries of thought, but that only happened after his voice was no longer an immediate nuisance. That is the irony. Society resists profound thinkers when they are alive, but turns them into monuments when they are dead. What was unbearable in the present becomes wisdom in the past. What was dangerous becomes harmless when it can no longer provoke change. Nietzsche's life was not the only one to be ignored in his time and exalted only later. Tesla was also a misunderstood visionary. He dreamed of free energy for all, imagined a wireless, accessible, advanced world. But his dreams threatened those who profited from limitation. Edison and J.P. Morgan, powerful figures of the time, saw Tesla as a threat to economic control. And so, his ideas were stifled. He died alone, impoverished, while the world used the foundations of his inventions without even recognizing their origin. His story is an open wound, genius stifled by self-interest. The same happened to Alan Turing. He broke codes, shortened wars, saved millions. He created the foundations of artificial intelligence. But because he was gay, he was punished by the state with chemical castration. He died at only 41, rejected by a society that was not ready to accept either his truth or his mind. Today, Turing is celebrated as a hero. But what good is a posthumous tribute to someone who was destroyed in life? Hypatia, one of the few intellectual women of antiquity, suffered a similar fate. For teaching philosophy and science at a time of growing fanaticism, she was brutally murdered. Her crime? Thinking freely, teaching logic, touching what was sacred with questions. In all these stories, we see a pattern. Those who see beyond are the ones who suffer the most. They were not rejected for being wrong, but for being right ahead of their time. If you think deeply, if you feel out of place, misunderstood, or lonely, know that you are in good company. Socrates, Galileo, Nietzsche, Tesla, Turing, Hypatia, all were at one time or another despised. Because thinking deeply is often seeing what the world is not yet ready to accept. And that's hard. That's why many thinkers find refuge in books, small groups, or silence. Not every place is fertile for ideas, and not every mind is ready to receive them. But there is a choice you can make. Instead of silencing your thoughts, find someone who will listen. Instead of dimming your light, direct it. Great ideas don't need huge audiences. They need attentive eyes. And if this video spoke to you, if it awakened something you already felt but didn't know how to name, I ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This shows the algorithm that this type of content deserves to exist. And if you want to support this work more directly, with any amount, know that your contribution strengthens this mission. Your help keeps this space alive and allows more people to find meaning where before there was only silence. Have you ever faced rejection for thinking deeply? If so, to show that you made it this far, write us a comment. Rejection